how binding is this SID? Like, for instance, I learned much to my dismay that because of a certain clause in AOA, we couldn't sell these cups because that wasn't our line of business, even though people wanted to buy them. So we just ended up giving them away. But apparently, it could have been changed. I'd like to ask you. Uh, if we want to change, let's say someone decides that foreign stocks is the way to go and RBI is willing to relax that limit, right? The $7 billion limit. Can you suddenly just start buying
No.
foreign stocks? What do you have to do to get a...
It's a question of what is a fundamental attribute change or a material change.
Something is not material change. If you're fixing a typo in this ID, then it's not a material change. But if something like this, where you have not said I'm going to invest in the asset class, but now you're saying I'm going to do it, it will be a material change. For that, you'll have to update the SID.
When you make a fundamental attribute change in the SID, you have to give an option to unit holders to exit without being charged an exit load.
So we can't operate outside of the rules defined in the SID. It sets the outer bounds of this is the overall framework and within which you need to operate, but it doesn't prescribe exactly how your day-to-day needs to be run.
I think from the sound of it, it's almost like a constitution or something. I mean, or if you ever want to understand what's happening, this is the one document from which you should be able to get all the information you need about your mutual fund to be able to either hold them accountable or not. And now with enough of the fancy AI tools out there, I guess you can actually upload it and ask questions from it without having to read the
Well,
thing.
you'll probably need more. For instance, there's something called a valuation policy. The valuation policy is also uploaded on the AMC's website. It tells you how the AMC will value certain instruments that it buys. There's something called a stewardship code, which says that if you buy a stock and that stock has a company has an AGM and they want a bunch of proposals that need to be approved or disapproved or rejected, you are going to have the fund manager go through each of these things and then choose whether or not to approve them. And they have to disclose this on their website. There's a stewardship code that every mutual fund needs to have as an EMC. And you can go to the website of the mutual fund and say, oh, what is your stewardship code? What is your valuation policy? What are all the other policies that are available to me as an investor that work in conjunction with the SID, on top of which there are the SEBI regulated rules. So for instance, I cannot have a large cap fund whose SID says I will invest in the top 200 stocks, because SEBI's regulation says, well, a large cap fund can only invest in the top 100 stocks as defined by AMFI with 80% of their AUM, which means that the SID has to kind of corroborate that down, to that level, but it will not specify the 100 stocks. It will say we will do it as long as along with the AMFI definitions of the top 100 stocks, which changes every 6 months. At the same time, you have all these documents that have to be read. If you put them into an AI framework, AI framework will probably tell you a bunch of things. And you suddenly might find that, listen, I saw the portfolio and I'm asking it, and it doesn't seem like this is somehow valid. But the language itself usually is vague enough to allow the fund manager the flexibility to say, well, you know what, markets have changed. I mean, if I choose a stock that says, well, we are high dividend yield, and it's a high dividend yield mutual fund, then is high a 1% dividend yield, is high a 4% dividend yield? The answer is nobody knows. And if it's just written high, then you could choose a stock with 1% dividend yield sometimes and 4% dividend yields a different time. So you necessarily have to have the language almost always that allows a certain level of flexibility to the fund manager, which is why usually you might be like, oh, is this a dividend yield fund? How come it doesn't have this stock which has such a great dividend yield in it anyways? These are questions that you could ask the fund manager perhaps, but they will not be violating the SID per se.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully. Past performance may or may not be sustained in future and is not a guarantee of any future returns.